Aloha, my name is Kendrick Chang, Youth Advisor for Livable Hawaii Kai Hui, and today I will be the host of another episode of Maunalua Past, Present, and Future. And believe it or not, our guest today is the Executive Director of a great organization that has the word Maunalua in it. Welcome, Doug Harper, Executive Director of Malama Maunalua.
Thank you.
Well, Doug, maybe if you can share a little bit about yourself. We have personally, offline have worked on a number of very different, several different initiatives and events. But, why don't you share a little bit about yourself to begin with?
So was not born and raised in Hawaii. Unfortunately, I was born and raised in the coastal state of Kansas, and went to the University of Kansas, and then went to graduate school there. Moved to DC for a number of years, then took a job in American Samoa, which was my path then to getting up here into Hawaii. So,
wow, American Samoa, all the way from DC.
Yeah, it's. I'm not sure culturally if I could have made a bigger leap than going from the political capital of arguably the world, but certainly the U.S., than to Pongo Pongo. But.
Right, and of course, especially for some the audience, who have watched me in the past, I currently go to school in DC at George Washington University.
GW. Yeah, that's a great campus.
Yeah, but maybe, how did you end up, with Malama Maunalua as, you recently, became Executive Director, it's been about a year.
A little under, yeah.
Yeah.
I got it, so when I was in American Samoa, I worked a lot with a number of the organizations here in Hawaii, NOAA, a lot of the federal organizations, basically. And so after about 3 years down there, I got a job with NOAA doing coastal management work. Mm-hmm. And after I was there for roughly 8 years, and then after 8 years, I was starting to look for something different. I was ready for a change, and it just so happened Malama Maunalua at that time was looking for an executive director. And so it just, timing-wise, worked out well, and I made the move, and I've been happy I did. It's been a great position.
Yeah. And, Malama Maunalua, has been a very active, conservation organization, especially in terms of coastal, as Maunalua Bay is really the pinnacle of our community. Maybe you can share a little bit for those in the audience, who probably knows about Maunalua because of its huki cleanups and events. But, what really is, the organization itself, what it really stands for and what it wants to, accomplish? Yeah,
so the organization was founded a little over 10 years ago when a number of the community members saw that Maunalua Bay was degrading, and they wanted to do something about it. And so they met with, it was really initially Laura Thompson and Carol Wilcox were the two that kind of initiated it and were the engine to get it started. And they just basically, they had generations of family that had grown up in the region. They themselves had grown up there. And so they didn't like seeing what was happening to the health of the bay. And so they wanted to form an organization that's focus was trying to restore the bay. And so speaking with Kapuna and scientists, they actually walked the entire coast of the bay to see for themselves, what they remembered as children to what they saw now, and then formed the organization. And from there,
now, for you as, even though you were not born and raised here, but, you are very familiar with our community, but how important it is to really, get the understanding from, these, cultural practitioners and experts who really understand, Maunalua, as a community.
It's paramount to being able to successfully implement projects in the Maunalua Bay regions, really in any region in Hawaii and the Pacific. They're the ones that have a special connection to the land and to the bay itself, and they are the ones that know the area the best. And so you have to bring them in to be able to get that wisdom and that knowledge that you wouldn't otherwise have, especially, for someone like me who doesn't have that long history with the area, that they can provide so much to me in understanding what it used to be like and culturally and scientifically and everything with what needs to be done to improve the bay.
Right. And maybe speaking a little more on the scientific part, as that's your background in terms of coastal management. Where as Maunalua Bay is really, a mixed use. We have a lot of different, activities and, a lot of different users, who use the base for, very different reasons, but, recreationally and so forth. But, how important it is to really have an organization like yours to kind of, be the initiative driven in terms of really, making sure that bay really sustains for generations.
Yeah, it's great to have, for any resource to have someone that's working towards, because there's so many different people, like you were just mentioning, people that are utilizing the resource. There are so many researchers that are doing research there that it sometimes becomes so disparate, it's difficult to understand everything that's going on. And so it's good to have that organization that's there that can, kind of put a fence around everything, so to speak, and say, all right, where are we going? How are we doing this? Are there ways that we can improve our coordination, improve our communication? And, a lot of times that can happen organically with the community just building it up, and sometimes it happens where an organization can help take the lead, and so that's where we fill that role or try to.
Okay. And then I think, maybe a particular, regular event you do is your Huki cleanups. And we do have some photos on the screen. I think, even for myself, when I was much younger, even before I started joining Livable Hawaii Kai Hui, I, was familiar with Malama Maunalua because of your cleanups, and partners with schools. And how important is it, for the Huki, week, whether it's weekly or monthly cleanups, important in terms of your work and, what you want to accomplish?
Yeah, so a number of years ago, and we're showing actually pictures right now of some of the volunteers that come out and participate and help us with the cleanups. A number of years ago, we brought in basically did a big assessment of what were the big threats to the bay. There was 3 threats. One was invasive alien algae, which we addressed through Huki. Another was land-based sources of pollution, and another one was overharvesting of some of the resources. And so addressing those individually with the invasive alien algae component, it's a huge problem in the bay. And the type of invasive alien algae we have is leather mudweed, which can't be easily removed. Like, I know a lot of people are familiar with what Kaneohe Bay does, is they have what they call the super sucker. Yeah. The big vacuum goes up there and just takes up all the algae, and that isn't feasible in Maunalua Bay. So it's incumbent upon the community to come out and remove the algae to try and restore some of the native habitat and restore. And so we have a couple of pictures of the results of that. And so this is a plot. We do it in 10 meter by 10 meter plots. And you can see clearly where the invasive algae used to be, and then where it still currently is. And so this is an especially cleaned plot, but you can see, and this is a larger one that happened before what we called the Great Huki, and then after. And on the left is what it looked like before, and on the right is what it looks like, or looked like after that, which would be around 2010, 2011. And one of the big initial initiatives that Malama Maunalua was able to do was to get funding to undertake that Great Huki and pull up a lot of that invasive algae right off the bat. And since then, we're just shy of 4 million pounds that have been removed.
Wow.
And what happens, what's interesting, is that we've done all this work and we've restored a lot of the, or are restoring a lot of the habitat, and people start forgetting what it used to be like. And so we've been able to show just the biomass of invasive algae that's been removed. The extent of it is is going down, and so it has proven successful, and it's important that the community recognize that all this effort has proven successful and is heading us in the right direction. Right.
But, even with all the Huki cleanups, I'm guessing, do you have to eventually go back to these sites to make sure, it doesn't get, run over again by invasives, or how does, the follow-up process work?
Yeah, it's a constant maintenance. It's, in essence, literally and figuratively, you're weeding. And so you're going out and you're removing it, and the weeds will come back. But the thing is you remove enough of the invasives to provide an opportunity for the natives to return. And so we are finding a greater percentage of natives are returning to the area. Like I was mentioning earlier, the extent and the thickness of the invasive species are going down. And so while we do have to go back, we are making headway.
Wow. And then, maybe on the science side, I mean, as you kind of collaborate with a lot of researchers or different, more on the academia side of things. Why is it important, or why is Mauna Lua Bay an interest for in terms of just research and more application on a more wider net of things in terms of coastal management?
Yeah, well, it's a relatively large bay. It's an urban bay, and so where it is, scientifically of interest, you've got, reefs, you've got seagrass beds, you've got native algae, you've got a whole bunch of different environments in there. But then, like I was mentioning, because it's an urban bay, the restoration of an urban bay is such a good, flat marker for other places that are dealing with this same type of issue.
Right.
Of how do you restore a place. And I think we actually have a picture of the impervious surface that you see around Mauna Lua Bay.
So this is the map again of the impervious surfaces
and
area.
so you can see some of the challenges here of all that red are outlets, storm drains, and it's also obviously associated with impervious surface. So that is all providing runoff pollutants that are going straight into the bay. And so if we're able to show how you can address, how you can mobilize and coordinate the community, how you can restore a bay that has this many challenges, it's a huge success for the state of Hawaii. It's a huge success for the Mauna Lua Bay regional communities. And then it's a great way to show other areas in the state of Hawaii of this is how we can do it when it's heavily urbanized. And, every place has its own unique challenges. And I personally think this is a great one for us to try and undertake.
And in terms of, the runoff, as, you're talking, it comes from the land, because I think most people conceptually may think that whatever is going on in terms of invasive is being caused of whatever is going on in Makai in the ocean. But it's really, it's really goes both ways. But, what in particular is, harming or, concerning in terms of, how the Mauka side, with the runoff affects, our ocean.
Yeah, and so the ocean, Mauna Lua Bay, all of it is, a lot of people kind of look at them as separate entities. And the bay is not a closed system. It takes all this input from, both subterranean water and overland water and nutrients. And so one of the big issues that, unfortunately that recent flood in April really demonstrated is how much sedimentation is reaching the bay. Of areas up in the Mauka lands and the Mauka area that are eroding, deforestation, things like that are causing sedimentation to get into the streams and then get pumped out into the bay, and that gets stopped actually by the invasive alien algae, leather mudweed. The name itself tells you all you need to know about what it kind of prefers as a habitat. But then the reefs get blanketed. And for those of us who enjoy surfing or scuba diving, you want clear waters. No one enjoys, well, in terms of view, no one likes swimming in chocolate. Maybe they enjoy that in terms of taste, but in terms of the way, you just can't see anything. It's not necessarily.
But I mean, the impact you guys are doing, it's not real. It's not only just helping in terms of just the natural ecosystem things, but it's really also helping on the aesthetic side too. And then maybe what else maybe is important for viewers to know, what impact your work is really doing to sustain Mauna Lua Bay.
Yeah, a lot of what we do is we have. It's trying to help coordinate. There's a lot of different organizations, and not that we're a coordinator, we're a partner in these different efforts to try and get people working together, trying to get organizations working together. For researchers, one thing that I think everyone in the community has frustration with all over is that there's so much research being done and they don't necessarily know where to go to find that information. And so we've created a knowledge data or a knowledge database where people can go and see what research has been conducted in Mauna Lua Bay. And also for benefits of resource managers is they can go there when they're making decisions of what needs to be done. They can go to one place now and find where this research is and trying to coordinate so that the next steps are done in the right direction and people have a little bit of a focus and there's a little bit of a guidance on where we should be going.
Right.
And so in addition to something like the Huki, it's trying to work with these different partners to find a way, that everyone is speaking with the same voice has greater
Yeah.
amplitude. And so we're trying
And can you share, like what partners do you, constantly engage with in terms of, the work you guys are doing?
It's all over the board, thankfully. There's a lot of other nonprofits, government, community groups, schools, universities. If you're operating in Maunalua Bay in any capacity, we want to be able to work with you. And so we keep a very open door policy to try and bring people in. And, everyone that works there has a view on what needs to be done, has an idea, has knowledge that can be helpful.
Right. And then in terms of, that partnership and collaboration, how important it is with, different, conservation organizations. Like maybe I kind of represent Livable Hawaii Kai Hui ourselves, and, we've worked closely together on, even just on events like the Maunalua Heritage Festival,
Yeah.
Like how important is that, in particular with just the different number of conservation groups that really encompasses, the Maunalua community?
Yeah, it's good because each group has a slightly different focus. And so the more groups that you bring in together, the more aspects of the community you're bringing together. But also the challenges we're confronting for any one of these organizations, and especially with Malama Maunalua doing working on the entire bay, it's too much for any one person or one organization to tackle. And so it's really important that you're able to bring in those other organizations that have similar mindsets as you to help with this effort, because no one organization can do everything they want to do, or at least it's going to be easier if you're partnering with people and groups who are willing to partner and who are wanting to help with the effort.
And then in terms of, the partnerships that I guess for your organization, well known with the different schools and, even universities, how does that component comes into, fruition?
That's a great one. I'm really proud of the way we work with schools and universities. So we have one aspect of our huki is the educational huki, where youth groups and schools will come out and the students will learn about the bay. So that starts with a couple of presentations from experts in the region, and they will learn about, whatever it may be, about algae or invasive species or native species, and then they go out and perform a huki. This has, a win-win in that the keiki learn about the bay, learn about the area where they live, which gives them, I think, more of a sense of community and more of a commitment to wanting to help restoration efforts. But then they go out and perform these activities that help with the actual restoration itself. And then with the universities, I think right now we have 11 interns that are working with us this summer, and each one has different projects that they're tackling. And so we get, all this, energy and brain power from these students coming in and helping us identify these different issues way more, or tackling these issues way more than we could as just, 3 or 4 staff members. We now have, 15 helping us total.
Wow.
And then for them, they get to implement what they're learning in schools. They're getting real world application of what they're doing, which is so much more rewarding than doing it, in a book or doing it in the classroom. And they get to do it under our mentorship and under our excellent science director's tutelage. And so it's a great win-win.
And then, maybe just like from there, what exactly, is maybe new, or what is really the top priorities for Malama Maunalua?
It's a lot of M's and L's, yeah. So some of the big priorities going forward, we have adopt a plot. And so with that one, where people can adopt 10 people, organizations, schools, whatever it may be, can adopt a 10 meter by 10 meter plot for themselves. We launched it a couple of years ago thinking we'd probably get, a couple of people interested in going, and it ballooned up way faster than we were expecting. We've already got 29 groups and families signed on, and so trying to find ways to continue that expansion, continue the excitement that we've seen around that, but then what are other ways that we can potentially maintain or fight back the growth of invasive algae? Are there biological ways we can address it? But then there's also ways, can we facilitate the regrowth of natives? So and we actually have a picture of native seagrass, which a lot of people who live in Hawaii probably haven't seen, because it's not necessarily, certainly in Maunalua Bay, it's not as prevalent as it once was. And so one of our interns, college student, is trying to find, are there ways that we can take this and facilitate its growth in areas where we've done clearings? And so are there ways that we can help facilitate the regrowth of native seagrass and algae into those areas? So that's something we're looking for as we move ahead. But then in addition, are there other projects, be it in the Malka area or Mackay, that the community sees as a big need, scientific community sees as having a big potential benefit, that we can then help creating the team and creating the energy and creating the focus to start addressing?
Then, just as a follow-up question about the regrowth of this seagrass, is this something very, very recently that Malama Maunalua has been working on? And, why is this regrowth like now the next step in, your organization's work? Yeah,
it's something that we've talked about and we've tried in different facets for a couple of years, but we have an excellent student right now, Caroline, who is committed and focused on doing this and finding different methods. There isn't a ton of information on how to do it in Hawaii, and so we're not only doing this in a way that will help us facilitate its regrowth, but then what we learn from this will be stuff that can be shared outside of Maunalua Bay, so we can send it. The information could potentially be of benefit to Maui or the Big Island or wherever else people are trying to do this. And so why this is kind of the next evolution of what we're trying to do is we've done a good job of fighting back a lot of the invasive algae, which is giving opportunities for these natives to return. Is there a way we can help with that? Is there a way that we can kind of kickstart them to come back? And so that's where this is, her work and a lot of the work we're doing is I think really important because it kind of helps you flip that. You turn the corner once you start getting the natives back in.
Right. And then, I guess just with part of the evolution, it's not like something you can just change overnight or, within a very short period of time. This is really a lot of your work is really long-term. And, with that said, how do you really focus on, really the big picture in a long-term use or just the future of the bay instead of just thinking about just the day-to-day progress?
Yeah. It is sometimes tough because this is not I would love to be able to say I'm going to wake up tomorrow and walk out to the bay and look, it's perfect, we're great, I can retire. It's not that way. And so you've got to always see on what you can do in the day-to-day, see what you can do in the month-to-month, break it down into bite-sized pieces, with always keeping in mind what your ultimate goal is. And so for us, it's always trying to envision what that bay is going to look like when it has, clean water, when it has abundant wildlife, but then seeing, okay, as we're headed towards that, what can we do right now? What's the half step or the full step that we can take to head us in that direction?
And then, as Maunalua Bay is such a big area, and there's different users and different people of different backgrounds, and some whom may have a different viewpoint on their perspective. So how important is it to really kind of try to, as much as you can, to make sure that people really understand, like, hey, this is really the long term, and these are the benefits?
Yeah, I think I haven't met someone yet that has said, I really want the bay dirty. I really want it to just be barren and gross. And so everyone has an interest in seeing the bay return to an improved health, see more fish out there, to see coral reefs that are healthy. And it's just finding those areas that we can agree. There's always going to be those marginal issues that people may have disagreements, but there's a huge middle where despite the disparate views, despite the varied backgrounds, people can generally agree that's the right way to go. How you get there can sometimes be a discussion, but by and large, people, if they keep their eye on the ball and really focus on what we're trying to do as a community, not necessarily just Malama Maunalua, there's a lot of overlaps, and it makes it, it's just finding those overlaps of where people agree and moving there.
Right. And then just taking a step back, as just recently, back in April, we really had a very impactful, flood that happened.
Unfortunately, yeah.
In East Oahu, and even though that was on the Malka side, it's really, as you mentioned earlier, really impacted, the ocean side. And I'm sure there's a lot of viewers who are familiar and were even, experienced maybe on a personal side too of that flood. So maybe if you can share more about, how exactly does that impact your work and what is going on in Maunalua Bay?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things with that. The first is that, when those type of things happen, you hate, like you heard stories of people's homes being destroyed. And so just as a member of the community, that's something you hate to hear and something that affects you. But then in terms of like the ecological side and the organization with the bay, there was a ton of sediment that came down with that, literally and figuratively. And so like we had to cancel a number of our Huki events because of brown water advisories. There was sediment on the beach. There was a fence that had somehow found its way out into the bay that everyone was struggling to get off the reef. And then, and then you go out and you start walking towards where we're going to be doing it, and you're just kicking up and resuspending the sediment. Surfers are talking about going out and, again, swimming in chocolate. Like they're surfing in this brown, disgusting water. And so it impacts our effort because of people, getting in the water, but also that's a lot of sediment now that is going to take some time to get flushed out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, really, you can never predict these things. And, really thank you, Doug, for, being with us and sharing your story and really keeping focused with the long-term things. I think even with, these, events that happen, once in maybe a generation, you always got to keep a focus on the long-term sustainability.
Right. And these things are going to happen. They're tragic when they happen, but it's one that you've got to see the big picture and where you want to head. So, yeah.
No, thank you. And, we do want to finally thank ŌleloNet Studios at Kaimuki High School for providing this studio and facility, and also to Livable Hawaii Kai Hui, who is the host and sponsor of this show. This is another episode of Maunalua Past, Present, and Future. Mahalo. Thank you.